What if I told you that every time you waited for someone else's permission, every time you doubted your own judgment, every time you felt the need to follow rules without questioning them, you were displaying the effects of a programming that began before you could even spell your own name? Picture this. A child enters kindergarten bursting with questions, challenging everything, creating their own games and rules. Now picture that same child 12 years later, sitting quietly in rows, raising their hand to speak, asking, will this be on the test? Instead of, why does this matter? What happened in between wasn't education, it was domestication. And what if I told you that the anxiety you feel when breaking even minor social rules, the way you automatically seek approval from authority figures, and the deep discomfort you experience when standing alone in your convictions, all of this can be traced back to a systematic conditioning process disguised as learning? The most shocking revelation we'll uncover today won't just show you how this programming works, but will give you the philosophical keys to unlock the mental prison you didn't even know you were in. So stay until the end, because what we discover there will change how you see every institution, every rule, and every moment of hesitation in your life. But before we journey into this uncomfortable truth, if you're someone who questions the systems around you, who senses that something deeper is at play in human behavior, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. When did you first realize you were following rules without understanding why? Your awakening might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Let's begin by asking a question that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you truly disobeyed? On the surface, we're told school exists to educate, to prepare us for success, to give us knowledge. But Arthur Schopenhauer, the brilliant 19th century German philosopher, saw something far more sinister at work. He observed that institutional education doesn't create thinkers, it creates followers. The task is not so much to see what no one else has yet seen, Schopenhauer wrote, but to think what nobody yet has thought about that which everybody sees. Yet what does school actually teach us to see? It teaches us to see authority as absolute, rules as unquestionable, and our own instincts as unreliable. From the moment we step into that first classroom, we begin learning the most important lesson of all, how to obey without thinking. Consider this. When was the last time school taught you to question a rule, to challenge a system, to trust your own judgment over an expert's opinion? Instead, we learn to raise our hands before speaking, to ask permission to use the bathroom, to accept that our natural rhythms of learning, eating, and even thinking must conform to a bell schedule created by strangers. This is what Schopenhauer called the manufacture of mediocrity. The system doesn't want exceptional individuals, it wants predictable ones. It doesn't reward the student who questions why they must learn calculus, but will never be taught how to understand their own emotions. It punishes the child who creates their own solutions instead of following the prescribed method. Friedrich Nietzsche took this observation even further. He argued that obedience isn't just taught, it's weaponized. The surest way to corrupt a youth, Nietzsche warned, is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. And this is exactly what happens in every classroom around the world. Think about your school experience. How many times were you rewarded for giving the right answer versus asking the right question? How often were you praised for following instructions versus creating something entirely new? The message was clear. Conformity equals safety. Deviation equals punishment. But here's where the programming becomes truly insidious. It doesn't stop at academic subjects. School teaches us that there's always someone else who knows better than we do. Teachers know better than students. Principals know better than teachers. The system knows better than individuals. We learn to outsource our judgment, to second-guess our instincts, to believe that wisdom comes from above, not from within. This creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that we are powerless to change our circumstances. When we're taught that our job is to obey, not to think, we become adults who wait for permission that never comes, who seek approval that's never enough, who follow paths that lead nowhere because someone with a degree told us it was the right way. And this obedience training extends far beyond the classroom. How many of us carry a subtle fear of authority figures? How many automatically assume that rules exist for good reasons? How many never learn to distinguish between respect and submission, between wisdom and blind compliance? Schopenhauer saw this as a form of spiritual violence, the systematic destruction of the individual will. He believed that true education should awaken the mind, not sedate it. It should encourage questioning, not discourage it. It should build independent thinkers, not obedient workers. But instead, we created a system that Nietzsche would later call the herd mentality, where safety is found in sameness, where the greatest sin is standing out, where the deepest fear is being alone with your own thoughts. In the next part, we'll explore how this programming wasn't accidental. It was by design. We'll uncover the historical forces that shaped modern education and why understanding this origin story is crucial to breaking free from its grip. But first, ask yourself, what rules do you follow without question? And what would happen if you stopped? Imagine if I told you that your mind was not educated, but manufactured, that somewhere in history, powerful people sat in rooms and designed a system not to enlighten you, but to control you. You might think this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but the truth is far more documented and far more disturbing than any conspiracy, because they did it right out in the open. The school system we inherited was never designed for human flourishing. It was designed for industrial efficiency. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, as factories replaced farms, society needed a new kind of human being, one who could follow schedules, obey supervisors, perform repetitive tasks without complaint, and most importantly, never question the system itself. The Prussian education model, which became the blueprint for modern schooling worldwide, had an explicit create obedient citizens and efficient workers. As Johann Pestalozzi, one of its architects, openly stated, the purpose was to render the common people docile to the will of their betters. Look around any classroom today, and you'll see the factory blueprint everywhere. The bell system, borrowed directly from industrial shift changes, the age-based groupings, as if human development followed the same schedule as an assembly line, the standardized testing, quality control for human products, the punishment of creativity, because factories need predictability, not innovation. Nietzsche saw this coming. Writing in the midst of this transformation, he warned that the democratic movement is not only a form of decay of political organization, but a form of decay, namely the diminishing of man, making him mediocre and lowering his value. He understood that systems designed for mass production would inevitably produce mass mediocrity. But here's what's truly chilling. The programming worked. We became adults who automatically seek permission, who feel guilty when we break minor rules, who trust institutions more than our own experience. We learned to fear the very independence that our ancestors died to protect. Think about this. When children enter school, they naturally resist sitting still for hours. They question everything. They create their own games with their own rules. But within months, they learn to suppress these instincts. They discover that curiosity is rewarded only when it stays within approved boundaries, that creativity is praised only when it follows predetermined formats, that intelligence is measured only by the ability to repeat what they've been told. Schopenhauer understood the psychological mechanism at work. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." But school systematically eliminates solitude. It surrounds children with constant supervision, constant comparison, constant pressure to conform. The damage goes deeper than academic subjects. School teaches us that there's always a right answer, and someone else has it. It teaches us that our value comes from external validation, grades, gold stars, approval from authority. It teaches us that rebellion is dangerous, that questioning is disruptive, that standing alone is a form of failure. This creates what we might call institutional dependency, the unconscious belief that we need systems to tell us what to think, how to behave, even who to be. We become adults who feel anxious without clear instructions, who panic when forced to make independent decisions, who mistake compliance for virtue. The tragedy is not just what we learned, but what we forgot. We forgot how to trust our own judgment. We forgot how to be alone with our thoughts. We forgot how to create meaning rather than just consume it. We forgot, as Nietzsche put it, how to become who we truly are. And the system continues because each generation of teachers, having been shaped by the same programming, unconsciously perpetuates it. They genuinely believe they're helping, never realizing they're participating in what Schopenhauer called the systematic stifling of human potential. In our final section, we'll explore how to break free from this programming. We'll discover what both Schopenhauer and Nietzsche believed about true education, real authority, and the courage required to become an individual in a world designed to prevent it. But for now, consider this. If your education was designed to make you obedient, what would real education look like? Let us begin with a truth that will either terrify or liberate you. Everything you were taught to fear about disobedience, that it leads to chaos, failure, and isolation, is a lie designed to keep you compliant. The real danger isn't in questioning authority, it's in never questioning it at all. Nietzsche understood this when he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. This ownership of self, this is what school systematically prevents and what we must now reclaim. But how do we undo decades of programming? How do we learn to trust ourselves in a world that taught us self-doubt was wisdom? First, we must embrace what Schopenhauer called the art of being alone. In solitude, away from the constant noise of other people's expectations, you begin to hear your own voice again. That voice, the one that was silenced in childhood, the one that was told to raise its hand before speaking, that voice knows things no teacher ever taught you. Schopenhauer would spend hours walking alone, not because he hated people, but because he understood that clarity comes only when we step outside the echo chamber of collective thinking. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, he wrote, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. Start small. Spend time alone, without entertainment, without distractions, without the desperate need to fill every moment with stimulation. In that silence, you'll discover that the anxiety you feel isn't fear of being alone. It's fear of what you might discover about yourself when no one else is telling you who to be. Second, we must learn to distinguish between legitimate authority and manufactured authority. True authority comes from wisdom, experience, and results. False authority comes from titles, institutions, and the mere claim to power. School taught us to respect the uniform, not the person wearing it. Nietzsche called this the revaluation of all values, the courageous process of examining every belief, every rule, every should that governs your life and asking, is this true? Is this mine? Does this serve me? Or does it serve a system that needs my compliance? This doesn't mean becoming recklessly rebellious. It means becoming thoughtfully independent. It means learning to evaluate ideas based on their merit, not their source. It means understanding that just because something is legal doesn't make it right. Just because something is traditional doesn't make it wise. And just because everyone believes it doesn't make it true. Third, we must reclaim our right to create our own values. This is perhaps the most radical act of disobedience, refusing to inherit your morality, your goals, your definition of success from institutions that never knew you as an individual. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch isn't about superiority over others. It's about sovereignty over yourself. It's about becoming the author of your own life, rather than merely the reader of someone else's script. It's about creating values that serve your actual experience, rather than following values designed to make you manageable. Ask yourself, what do you actually want from life? Not what you were told to want, not what would make your parents proud, not what society rewards, but what would make you feel most alive. The answer might surprise you because for so many of us, we've never been alone with that question long enough to hear the real answer. Fourth, we must learn to see disobedience as a spiritual practice. Every time you question a rule, every time you trust your judgment over an expert's opinion, every time you choose authenticity over approval, you are performing an act of self-creation. This requires what Schopenhauer called the courage of one's own convictions. It requires being willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to lose the comfort of belonging to the herd. But in exchange, you gain something infinitely more valuable. You gain yourself. The path forward isn't easy. You will lose friends who prefer the predictable version of you. You will face systems that punish non-compliance. You will experience moments of doubt, wondering if the old way of unthinking obedience wasn't simpler, safer, better. But remember, the snake that cannot shed its skin dies. The mind that cannot question its programming remains forever enslaved. The person who never learns to disobey never learns to truly choose. Here is the most powerful truth of all. The greatest act of disobedience you can commit is not breaking someone else's rules, it's making your own. Nietzsche understood that the Übermensch doesn't just reject false values, they create true ones. They don't just escape the cave, they become the light. They don't just refuse to obey, they learn to command, not others, but themselves. This is what school could never teach you, what no institution can give you, the recognition that you are not just a product of systems, but a creator of meaning. You are not just a rule follower, but a value maker. You are not just a student of life, but an author of it. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man's face as a rule says more and more interesting things than his mouth." Your true face, not the mask you learn to wear for approval, has been waiting behind years of conditioning. It's time to let it emerge. So what now? Now you begin the great work of becoming who you actually are. You question every assumption. You examine every fear. You create your own education based on what genuinely matters to you, not what someone decided should matter to everyone. You learn to be comfortable with uncertainty because certainty is the enemy of growth. You learn to be comfortable with disapproval because approval seeking is the enemy of authenticity. You learn to be comfortable with solitude because in solitude you discover that you are never truly alone. You have yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that disobedience isn't the opposite of love. It's the deepest expression of it. When you refuse to diminish yourself for others' comfort, when you refuse to betray your own experience for social harmony, when you refuse to trade your soul for security, you are loving yourself enough to insist on being real. The child you were before school got to you, the one who questioned everything, who created freely, who trusted their own instincts, that child is still there. They've been waiting through years of programming, years of compliance, years of forgetting, but they remember you, even if you don't remember them. It's time to go back and reclaim what was taken. It's time to learn the difference between education and indoctrination, between respect and submission, between wisdom and obedience. It's time to discover that the very things you were taught to fear, solitude, uncertainty, the responsibility of choice, are actually the doorways to freedom. As Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." The programming was meant to kill your individual spirit. That it didn't, that something in you is reading these words and recognizing their truth, proves that you are stronger than the system that tried to shape you. So tell me in the comments, what rule will you question first? What assumption will you examine? What act of beautiful, thoughtful, life-affirming disobedience will you commit in service of becoming who you really are? Share this video with someone who needs to remember their own power. Subscribe if you're ready to continue this journey of unlearning. And remember, the world doesn't need more obedient people. It needs more real ones. The prison door was never locked. You always had the key. You just forgot you were allowed to use it.